kina semdol ka ke mo fa seda.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the midweek update in Talking in Stations. I am your host tonight, Silver Suspiria. With me, I have an exciting panel of guests. Juliana Soder with me. Say hi, Jules.
Juliana Soder, Valor Accord CEO for about 10 years now.
Hopefully you all can hear me tonight. Jules? Yep, they can, so that's good. Last week we had some audio issues. Also with me is Gory Thane. Oh, you're really low, Gory. Could you turn your mic up a little bit?
Yep. Make sure you introduce your title, by the way, Gory.
Yes. Tell us who you are.
CEO of Last Right and PvP Director of Valor Accord.
Yeah, you're still low. Let's work on your mic a little bit there. But Renai Vero as well. Hello, Renai. Hopefully I said your name right.
Yeah, Renai Vero, and I'm a member of Moira Corporation, a director there, and I'm also the Alliance diplomat for the Lower Courts.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you guys for joining the show. I wanted to get a little bit of background on you guys because the Valor Accords, or GMVA as you're known, and Moriar, old alliances and corporations storied in faction warfare. And Julianus, you've been around since like the Stone Age, right? Like 2003?
A little bit. Not that bad. Like 2007. But at that point, you're quibbling over minutiae. You know, it's pretty old. I feel very old myself.
So tell me a little bit about where you came from, Jules. Like, how did you get started? We'll run down the panel like that. And how'd you get into
Yeah, sure. Okay, so in EVE Online, I played, and I first joined as a Marian character, if you can believe that, right?
Whoa.
Yeah, it's gross. But I went to nullsec and an auger with a Tech 1 laser fitted to it, and I fucked around, and I got blown up. So I quit EVE for like 6 months. Then I came back, and I joined as a Gallente character, Juliana Soder, my second character in EVE, and played the game. Joined a role-playing corp called Strix Armaments and Defense as a sort of eclectic group of people. Joined another corporation called Foom, Dead Parrot Shop, reference there. And then I got into faction warfare as soon as it was released. And basically I've stayed there the entire time except for a couple intermissions, very small intermissions. And I've been a faction warfare guy trying to do the good fight for the Gallente Federation for freedom, democracy, that kind of.
I gotcha. Gory, how about you? Where's your roots at EVE, and how'd you get into it? How'd you wind up in GMVA?
Well, first, is my volume all right now?
Still a tad low.
All right.
It's better, though.
It is better.
You want me to go, and then you can come back, Corey?
Sure.
Yeah, try again. I just cranked you a little bit.
All right, how's that?
There you go.
All right, so I want to skip the boring parts. Basically, I was a boring Care Bear for years. And with that, kind of on again, off again, like most EVE players. But eventually got introduced to PvP, and I was very bad at it. But I was immediately obsessed with the idea of getting a solo kill. Not just any kill, but like a kill against somebody who could fight back. Took me a while, but my first solo kill that I counted was a Blaster Scram Kite Atron, and I Scram Kited a Tormentor, which I find hilarious. But ever since I got that kill, I was immediately addicted to PvP and small gang stuff, and kind of floated around for a while. Ended up spending some time in Fac War as a pirate, just kind of killing everything. And then I ended up getting drawn into one of the sides, and then I really got interested in the game from there. Eventually, I decided to start my own corp. And I decided to join my least favorite of the militias, Gallente Warfare militia. But I joined it because my corp at the time was based in Orville, which is Gallente High Sec. And I didn't want to be a war target, so I decided not to join the Caldari militia. From there, I basically saw a public fleet posted in militia by Juliana Soder. And I joined the fleet, really liked Jules, and here I am.
Fantastic. Renai?
Yeah, so like Jules, I joined, and there were was boring parts where I did Care Bear stuff. I joined Moira. I think the first time was in 2009 or 2010, and it was during a break from faction warfare, and we were doing incursion stuff. It was right when the incursion expansion had launched, and I wanted to be involved in that content, and kind of like the role playing, the lore of the game. I'd read the Empyrean Age novel and really liked it, and really liked all of the, the characters and the political intrigue established between the factions. And so I was a Gallente character, and I wanted a Gallente corporation. And at that time, Jules was active as a Gallente participant in all of that incursion stuff. So that's how I got into Moira. I ended up leaving, coming back. When I came back, Moira and was part of GNVA at that point. That alliance had been formed, and it was in the beginning stages of the campaign when the Gallente militia took the whole war zone, and we all got the medal for the first time. And that whole campaign just really changed my entire outlook about EVE, and the PvP and the faction warfare aspects of it. From there, I immediately was hooked on that and have never looked back.
Yeah, that was slightly before my time, even in the faction warfare game. I am sad that I missed that. So Jules, tell me about GMVA. A lot of people see you guys as sort of the role player on the Gallente side, sort of like a kind of. I think the face of Gallente Militia. A lot of times when people think Gallente Militia, they see GMVA. Were you guys always a faction warfare alliance? Did you get into that? Like, what's the history there?
So that's a good question. Basically, faction warfare prohibited alliances from joining the militia directly until a patch that CCP made to the game a number of years ago. I can't. You'd have to look up exactly what the time frame that was. But basically, what happened was that CCP realized that alliances need to actually have official recognition as members of the militia, because alliances are how you organize larger groups of people. You can't just have one corporation be an alliance. Like the hegemony of that would just, you can't have independent decision making. You have different cultures and different corporations. You have to have independence. You have to have some kind of autonomy inside of a coalition of groups, like an alliance. So CCP patched the game, allowed alliances to join. Before then, Valor Accords was actually basically just a forum thread. There was a forum thread on eveonline.com that was the Valor Accords, and basically you'd have lists of corporations that were members of Valor Accords, and that was like the 5 or 6 guys of corporations that actually wanted to be in faction warfare and fight for the Gallente Militia, which was very challenging back then, because the Gallente Militia was sort of the underdog for many years at the start of the faction warfare sort of career path, I suppose. So anyways, when the alliance was created, because it could be created in the game for real, QCATS, Quantum Cat Syndicate, was the primary executor of the alliance for about 7 or so months or so. I can't remember the exact time frame. I have to go back to the actual .land maps, .land recordings of all this. But QCATS at some point decided they didn't actually want to have to do the cat herding of an alliance. And I'm sure, Silver, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. It's very frustrating trying to... Yeah, it's very challenging to manage an alliance. So QCAT stepped down as executor, and they said, if nobody steps up to take executor, then the alliance will be disbanded. And what I did was I took Moira, made Moira the executor. It was sort of a small alliance at that point, and we sort of kept a couple corps in it. We kept a couple groups of people active, and we kept the alliance alive. And it's slowly grown over the years to the state that we are today. So that's the situation. It's always been, after the alliance was created, the alliance has always been a faction warfare, but Moira Corp has sort of been in and out of faction warfare before that time frame.
I find that stuff really interesting because it's always the players leading the way, right? But the players will find a way to work together, and then like CCP sort of catches up, right? So it's a really... CCP realizes
that it might be good to let the players play the game.
Yeah, like together with friends, right? That's like how you do with EVE, right? So that's
incredible,
really,
right?
Yeah, that's really amazing.
it's good to point out QCat's actually left the alliance and now is rejoined. So it's like a big family reunion after like more than half a decade. QCats is back in the alliance after that whole thing.
Oh, that's good news. I didn't know that. Like, I did see QCats starting to crop back up when we left the war zone, and that was good to see. And I'm glad that they've coalesced back home. That's a nice circle of life story there.
Yeah, it's
Quick shout out to their new CEO. They came back under new management, and so Going Off-Roading is the CEO of QCats, and he's doing it.
And they got a couple of very good PvPers. Makarov Putin is one of their good boys. They actually created a Freeport Citadel in Nisso. So if you ever need, economically, we are supporting the low-sec ecosystem by having a Freeport that you can go buy stuff in. So
that's great. So let's transition a little bit to the main topic of the show that I want to talk to you about, Jules, is the role play. How does role play affect the operation of GMVA and the way you lead things? Is it a major because when I remember when I flew with you, it was sort of a big part of your personality, but I never knew how much it drove your decisions as a leader within GMVA.
That's a good question. Basically, roleplay provides more flavor and context to the to EVE Online than simply like grinding out kill mails continuously. Like you could be a PvP alliance and operate in EVE Online in a complete vacuum. Like a lot of Wormhole Corps do this. They just exist. They log in, get their money, then they go get kill mails, and they go back and make more money, go get more kill mails. And I sort of have sensed since the start of my career in EVE that isn't a very sustainable sort of trajectory. A lot of people get tired of this endless loop of money turning into ships being blown up, turning into money, turning into ships blown up. So in order to avoid that catastrophic failure of an organization, I've sort of focused on using roleplay as like a way to keep an organization sort of flavored in a way that's interesting. It gives people something to fight for instead of just like, oh, I'm just here to show up to a fleet because I can get a couple kill mails and raise my kill board efficiency by 0.5% this week. That's not exciting to most people.
No, I completely agree. I think roaming around and getting kills only sustains somebody's need for fighting only so long, right? You need a purpose. Yeah. You need the bad guy. You need, why are we even doing this? The narrative, right?
Right, and the lore of EVE Online, it is unique. Like Elite Dangerous or these other spaceship video games, it doesn't have the depth of lore that's necessary to really provide that kind of context or that narrative. And EVE Online does have this narrative where humanity has been stranded on the brink of extinction, and we're clawing our way back from extinction. We're trying to find ourselves as a species, but technology and all these crazy conflicts are happening, and that's really testing our fortitude as a species. And EVE Online is like, is democracy what you want? Is kleptocracy and corporate, pillaging what you want? Is imperial sovereignty and slavery what you want? Or is like your family and tribe what you want? And that sort of calls to a lot of the internal ethos of like people in real life. Like you have to find yourself in real life, and you sort of find yourself in the story. And Eve is like, okay, I'm actually into democracy. I think that's a good idea. So I'm going to fight for the Gallente militia. That sort of echoes what you think. Or you find a fantasy opportunity where you're like, okay, I'm going to be like this cool imperial warlord in the Yamar Empire. That's a cool fantasy sort of thing to explore. So that provides a context for PvP that's more than just undocking, shooting spaceships, and then exploding, in my opinion. And that's what drives GMVA's existence, and it will drive it for the future.
Yeah, if I could jump in real quick there as well. Because roleplay is one of the things that really brought me into the game as well. Before I got into the PvP stuff, I got into like the Intergalactic Summit is a forum on the EVE Online website where people in character talk about the politics and the lore and all the crazy things that are happening in the CCP news articles, right? And so I saw those things and got interested in that, and then I logged into the game. And EVE Online is very, very unique because you can log into the game and everything that you're avatar in the game does can be considered in character, even if you're not role playing. And so, a lot of role players would probably consider GMBA to be a role play light organization. Not everybody in GMBA is expected to be a role player or expected to be interested in that. But it's amazing how many times when we're sitting around fighting in a Plex in a faction warfare system, in the downtime, some lore topic will come up, and people that are not role players will be like, wait, the Gallente Federation has a president? What is that about? There's an election? What's going on there? And so it also gives you kind of a thing to talk about and a thing to be interested in during those sort of downtime moments.
Fantastic segue, by the way. Let's talk a little bit about the Gallente presidency, and Jules, your interest in becoming the Gallente president, typically held by an NPC, right? A non-player character, a very lore-entrenched role, right? That not a lot of people even know, like this whole back lore story that happens like every couple of years, right? There's been elections in the past. We've had Gallente presidents. So talk to me about your interest in becoming part of the living lore and taking the role of a traditionally an NPC.
Right. And so to preface this, I don't actually ever want to claim that I was going to become. CCP has full ownership of the story of the game. I'm not trying to force myself to be part of their game story.
That's part of what I wanted to talk to you about. Did you discuss this with CCP at all?
No, not at all. No, basically what I was trying to do was to poke the bear. I was trying to poke the bears like, CCP, come on, give us something to interact with. And we actually did this like 10 years ago, so that might be aging myself a bit. I was Moira was just fresh in existence, right? And our former CEO or co-founder, I guess. I was like young. We had the guy who taught me everything I knew. The guy's name was Johnny Damodred. That was the character name. And I never actually talked to him ever again after like 6 months after that. But he was a cool guy. And he actually created a presidential campaign. And you can look this up on like the old forums. He ran for Gallente president 10 years ago. And I ran as his vice presidential candidate 10 years ago. And it was hilarious because everybody was like, but players can't do this. Players can't interact with the lore this way. So all that same consternation is occurring now with this effort this year. But basically, the Gallente Federation has a president, and basically any.
You kind of cut out.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So the Federation has a president, and any citizen of the Federation can run for presidency. And I decided if I was going to actually try to poke the bear enough, I would have to run for that high office. CCP had to respond in some way in that case. And that might incentivize them or encourage them to interact with their player base in a more dynamic than just creating news articles that have the same spreadsheet of names that had run for presidency 5 years ago. I was going to be some random variable in that matrix of storytelling. And I could create news articles that way. I can sort of post my opinions about the lore, the narrative that's taking place. So I just keep spamming local chat with my shit. And people reply back. They reply to the forums. Diana Kim posts nonsense, that kind of fun stuff.
Wait, Diana Kim? No.
Oh, there's lots of Diana Kim. There's infinite Diana Kim. But anyway, that provides a feedback loop that's more interesting than just like than CCP creating paragraphs of text, in my opinion. And people hate me, people love me. Like, there's a lot of, like, I'll be the first one to admit I'm not the most popular person in the universe. I don't try to be a bad person, I hope. But people don't like me for various reasons. So that creates a lot of interesting drama. Drama is the core of storytelling, right? You need to have some kind of drama to drive a narrative. If it's just a group of random NPC character names making articles, that's not interesting to players. Players want to see players involved in the lore. That's how players will be interested in the storytelling of the game. And that's what will bring people back to EVE in that audience. And that audience is a valuable part of the EVE Online community because it actually is a very invested group of people that actually wants to play the game.
Well, that's interesting points because I think that CCP used to be better at this. years ago when we had stuff like Caroline Star and these sort of things that took lore out and put it in the hands of players, you know, in such a way where we're interacting with it, but it was still going to pan out one way or another. I kind of feel like that's fallen way away. Like they've tried a little bit. It's much better. It's getting a little better now with the whole Triglavian and precursor stuff, I think. But there was a gap there of like at least 3 or 4 years where there really wasn't any interaction with lore.
Yeah, that was one thing that Jules and I talked about when we were coming up with this whole idea, was that when the Amar Empire had their transition in leadership after, and this is lore stuff, but their empress got killed by the Drifters, you know, they had a whole big player tournament, and there was this huge thing, and the players actually, it was really cool the way CCP.
It was at FanFest. They had a whole thing at FanFest for it. There was like a fucking stage with like gaming PCs.
and the team that won, representing one of the Amar great houses, their candidate for Empress got to be written into the game as the new Empress, Tash Murkon.
Yeah, and their Titans are still sitting outside of the station in Amar, right? You could see their names.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, just this idea that as a player, you can have this impact and have a lasting impression on the story of the game, that's very unique to any MMO, and one of the great things that draws people to EVE. But unfortunately, like you said, it has kind of fallen by the wayside. So we were hoping to see some, to kind of encourage CCP to look at that again as a draw.
Yeah, and we had to provide the bait. We had to sort of bait the lure with a player. And I sort of posted a couple forum posts about it, and CCP started to actually drop my name into actual news articles and stuff. So I just started to run with it after that. So
yeah, I will say the person that the CCP dev that has been writing a lot of these news articles, this isn't unique. He actually it's CCP Delegate Zero. He's been doing a pretty good job of picking up on things that are happening in the roleplay community and kind of writing them in, and that is exciting to that community. And so we hope to see more of that. That was kind of also part of the calculus.
So talk to me. What was the end goal result? Like, Jules, what if CCP contacted you and was like, "Yo, we really like this. Let's make this happen. Let's make Juliana Soder president of the Gallente Federation."
It's never gonna happen. but like, so yeah, it was trying to create that impetus to drive storytelling, but also like, okay, so let's just pretend that a miracle happens, like the planets and the stars align, and CCP did a lot of crack cocaine or something and decided to make my character the president. Okay, so I would basically turn my character into an NPC, and I would just be like an NPC. I wouldn't actually play the game on Juliana Sitter anymore, would be the way I would do this. And I would never want to be an active like driver of storytelling in the game from an NPC perspective. I'm not going to control the fleets of the Gallente Federation. No, that's not going to happen. But I was trying to like force the storytelling to occur by being a player that had some tiny bit of authority or tiny little bit of infamy, perhaps, to make the storytelling happen. If CCP decided to run with it, then I would.
Lost you again, Jules. No, you're silent, buddy.
One of my other characters in Player Corporation. So
you cut out there for a sec. We missed anything. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, I think Silver cut.
Silver? Did you cut out Silver?
Was it me? Might have been me. I don't know.
Yeah, I heard a bleep bloop and something happened.
Okay.
Anyways, basically the point was that if I got elected president by CCP, I would turn my main into an NPC. I would not play that main anymore, and then my alt would be my playing character. I was never intending to take control of the Gallente Federation from a player perspective. So
I gotcha. So then something happened, and it's kind of funny that we postponed the show. That we were supposed to do this on Wednesday, and then the staff got tied up with something. But since then, something has happened in the lore. Can you explain what happened? And I'll post the article on stream here.
Yeah, please do. So I was actually like waking up. I was like rolling out of bed and I was looking at my phone. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And CCP started spamming news articles. Like if you look at the news articles on their website, it's a thing called World News and all Twitch. Basically, the news articles cut out for like a month, right? So there was January, there was a post. Then it was a whole 30 days or so until the next news article was released, and all the role players and people like me were like, "What the fuck is going on, CCP? Why are there no articles?" And basically, we were waiting for something to happen, and then ta-da! The day before the election, basically all of the NPC presidential candidates almost got assassinated by a huge, catastrophic terrorist attack kind of thing. And like one of them was landing in a space shuttle on the tarmac, and a cruise missile hit their space shuttle and blew up the space shuttle. One of the presidential candidates got like nerve gassed in a parliament chamber while they were talking in Taki Prime. Another one was bombed outside of a soccer stadium while they're about to show up for a presidential speech. Very dramatic news. And it was like, what the fuck, man? What the fuck's going on? And I logged in my characters, like, I didn't get any special attention. My character didn't get bombed. I was like, oh, that's disappointing. And then, of course, everybody started posting these Emperor Palpatine memes of like, I love democracy. I love democracy when all my presidential opponents get assassinated. But of course, everybody in EVE Online's universe gets clones, right? So all of them had like clones. Well, some of them had clones, and so like they got killed by the bomb, but they're like their clone got backed up, and so their brain's mostly intact. I guess they lost like maybe a couple days of like memories or whatever. Like you can imagine, if you're a capsuleer, it's pretty hard to assassinate a dude that has like a brainstem implant that keeps their consciousness backed up, you know. So I guess that's what my character did get.
We don't see another return of like ridiculous Clone Jack storyline.
No. I don't think that's going to happen. I just think it was a way to postpone the election. I think CCP needed some way to make the election more interesting, and they needed a plot twist. It's a little bit canned, perhaps, but like at least it's interesting. At least it's something that's happened. Otherwise, everybody was complaining like the election was just going to happen. That it was going to be like maybe a forum post. It's like President blah 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 is now president. Since the presidency is like a 1 in 5 years thing, you want to have more drama associated with the lore developments in EVE. If it's every once 5 years, it seems to be a waste if you don't actually make use of that unique situation. So hopefully CCP capitalizes on this and makes something interesting out of the story that draws people's attention to it, makes people want to participate in the story.
So where does this take your story now?
The president, Jacques Rodin, says that General Julianus Soter was one of the targets of the assassinations campaigns. I don't remember anything happening. I don't recall something happening to me. But I guess that just might have been that they probably couldn't kill a capsuleer. That might have been the situation. But it basically gives me a chance to talk more about what we're trying to do. Like one of the reasons why I ran for president was that all this Triglavian shit was going on, all this drifter stuff was going on, and a lot of the lore was being left very vague. Like imagine being a citizen in this bizarre world where you got like aliens coming out of wormholes, abducting people and invading space and doing all this stuff, but your government doesn't actually talk about it. Might be a problem for democracy. Imagine being being a citizen of the United States and this random stuff is happening and like, I don't know, somebody's abducting your people. Probably want to talk about it on the nightly news. Probably good to talk about it. But nobody was talking about it in the presidential campaign. So that's why I ran for president. It's like, maybe we should have a campaign issue. We should talk about real world stuff to these poor people on these planets and make sure their interests are being represented. But also faction warfare has been on the back burner for CCP for years. And a lot of the faction warfare players also have been pissed off about that. And I don't want to represent that to the lore of the storytelling of the game. Talk about why faction warfare is important for gameplay purposes, but also make sure that there's some interesting storytelling in faction warfare that keeps people interested.
Yeah, one thing that was going on when we were deciding whether this would be a good idea was the whole faction warfare treaty on the Amar Minmatar side, and that was also kind of bringing up through lore, through kind of role play, actual mechanical problems with the content in faction warfare that has been neglected for so long.
Yeah, we covered that extensively. At least we spent at least 2 shows on that. And it was very interesting.
Yeah, it's really depressing when the players have to like craft a treaty to make the game less broken.
Is it though? Is it though? Like, yeah, I agree that CCP could be more active in these things, but like I said before, it's usually the players figuring out what needs to be done and then doing it, and then CCP catching up, right? Like, I love the fact that the players can just be like, we see this problem, I'm going to fix it as a player. And that it sort of represents the beauty of the sandbox that we really have. Like, you have the freedom to do these things.
True, but like I've been to basically every faction warfare roundtable for every fan fest for the past 6 years at Reykjavik, and I encourage the crowd in the cramped conference room that those fan fest faction warfare roundtables are being held to raise their hands to CCP's developers about what needed to happen to fix the video game. I think Silver, you were there for one of those, right?
I was there for the last one.
Yeah, for the last one, like 2 or 3 years ago, right? Yeah. And the last FanFest, you and I were there, and we were in the Faction Warfare Roundtable, I think. And we're like, well, maybe we should make people suspect when they go into Faction Warfare Plexus, so I don't have to be -10 security status to play the Faction Warfare game. But CCP was like, oh, but the new players might be concerned. They can't play without becoming pirates. So I was like, well, okay, sure, but I become my character who is trying to defend the Gallente Federation is now a pirate, -10 pirate. Like, people have to earn that.
You can't even go to your own empire space because you're a pirate.
I can't even go to HiSec.
I go to HiSec. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Players. It's also the new players that are sitting there in their Tristans, while quote unquote neutral pirate players that have been veterans in the game forever slide in on them in faction frigates, and the new player has to like
wait for them to shoot.
For them to shoot until they can aggress them, or they lose security status.
Yeah, you have to wait for the Garmer to get to 28 kilometers to open fire with his warp disruptor before you defend yourself. Like, that's not good. That's not great.
And it's not new player friendly either.
At all. No, yeah. So like we argued that. You know about level 4 mission, Silver. It's a whole thing. It's like, why is this loyalty point mechanic in the game in this way? There has to be a way to fix it, at least, maybe tweak it. You can just tweak it a bit and probably mitigate 90% of the problem. So we've argued for that, and we just wanted to try to see if that was a thing that we could solve with our candidacy, and also about like mentioning it, trying to represent my players too, like, and everybody that plays faction warfare. People leave faction warfare because they see these problems. And they see these problems not happening, not being fixed by the game developer. So we're trying to appropriately, in a friendly and constructive criticism kind of way, try to address those issues.
Yeah, no, I think that's the way to go to address these things and to get CCP's attention is exactly what you're doing and what the Amar Minmatar guys are doing. But transitioning, again, a nice little transition provided there. I kind of know a group of people that might be interested in assassinating Juliana Soder. Who would that might be?
Well, there's a lot of people that hate me.
Well, specifically currently, what's going on within the Gallente militia right now? What's the dynamic there? It's a little bit spicy, is it not?
Do you want me to hop in first on this one, Jim?
And Gory, I also deeply desire your commentary. But yeah, Renai, please.
Yeah, let's let Gory first. We haven't heard from him.
Hey, Gory, go for it.
All right. I mean, yeah, I'm happy to be here to kind of give our side of the story, because I heard the talking stations with Ada, and got to hear their side a little bit.
Yeah, to preface that, we've done the series that we're doing is what does LoSec look like in 2020, and we've been covering the developing situation in your war zone. We've had Pen is Out on, we've had Aderon on, and of course now we owe you guys a chance to weigh in on what the current political climate is. So go for it.
All right. Yeah, don't forget RVB too. That's a good picture.
That's right. We had RVB on as well. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, Ader, we were, I think, all happy to see Ader come back to the war zone. Because I mean, I know you're aware that there's not that many Gallente groups left as far as big groups go. So we were happy to see Ader come back. Happy to see fresh bodies come back to the war zones, new allies, and I think we were probably all or most of us disappointed to see them deploy back to Follette, which is a little bit far from most of us and what we do. But they were able to do a lot of good work down there because when they came back to the war zone was mostly Caldari. So they did a lot of good work, flipping systems all around the south of the war zone. I mean, I can't even tell you how many iHub bashes that I've done with Ader. Mostly just random kitchen sink stuff, some doctrines, a couple of times we use capitals, but we spent a lot of time on iHubs together. A lot of systems that they push, a lot of systems that we push, they come help us. Very much appreciated all their help, all their good work. Going farther back than Ader coming back to the war zone, we had you guys fed up, and we had Pen is Out, and we had Magneta Digitus? Is that how you say that?
Yeah, the old
right, yeah.
Black Fox.
Yeah, and I mean, Jules and probably Renai can talk a lot better with more authority about like our past deep relationship with those groups. But suffice to say, we have a very long-standing relationship with what is now called Wangs. But it's Magneta Digitus merged into Wangs, and both groups ended up leaving the militia. But we've never really stopped working with them. And I mean, obviously, when you work with people for years, I mean, can I say a decade? Is that accurate?
Half a decade at least, yeah. Like
I would say at least 5 or 6 years, yeah.
Yeah, okay, there's some drama, but yeah.
Yeah, so
I'll jump in real quick to say, just on an individual level, even before Black Fox, even before Rapid Withdrawal, some of the pilots that are in those groups go back to Gallente militia groups that predate even that.
That's very true.
We have flown with for over a decade, and so there literally are individual pilots who have known each other and liked each other and been flying in the same fleets for a decade.
That's a great point. Yeah, so like we can say that we've been flying with Wangs for like 6 years, but we've also been flying with many of their pilots for far longer. So lots of long relationships there. And even after they left the militia, they've still continued to be primarily a low-sec entity. They spend very little time in their null-sec. Whenever they left, there was a little grace period, but they ended up resetting GMVA, so we're no longer blue. But we still work together quite a lot. They come help us with defensive timers or offensive timers, and we do the same with them. And then also one thing that's really cool is there are several members in Wangs that are still very interested in FAC War. Not enough to leave Wangs, but they still want to be involved in some way. So we've had multiple members from Wangs, including Mr. MP 2008, come over and say, "Hey, I want to help you with this current system siege. Here's 50 or 100 or 150 ships." They just give it to us. And then they also hang out and help us fight because they're looking for content, but some of them kind of miss the good old system sieges and that kind of content. So they've been very, very good friends and allies. Not blue, but still definitely allies or frenemies, however you want to call that. So we've had that relationship kind of persist even with the splitting of them leaving FAC War. And then you fast forward to when Oh, and I guess I should. This is a good point to mention that they've kind of just been a general friend to Galmil, not only GMVA but also like Guardians of the Gate and some other groups, including Nader. There is actually on. I did a lot of killboard research in preparation for this. It was on, I believe, the 5th, if I'm not mistaken, the 5th of January. Wangs came in and helped defend the Ader Citadel in what was that? Aderain? Is that how you said that, Jules?
Yeah, Adarain.
Aderain. Yeah, they came and helped defend a citadel in Aderain for Ader. It was under attack by a group called what is it? A Black Rebel Rifter Club?
Was that this year?
That's the Corp. Yeah. January 5th of this year. Or no, that's the Corp. The Alliance is called a Devil's Tattoo.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, the Alliance.
Okay. Yeah, old
So
Alliance.
they came in, they dropped like a Dread and I think some faction battleships, maybe like 10 or 15 of them, I think. And Wangs came in and helped kind of do what they do well. They dropped a couple of caps and actually a pretty neat little fleet of assault frigates and Tech 2 Logi frigates to help Ader. And they actually just decimated Devil's Tattoo and completely defended the Citadel. And it's pretty funny because fast forward, I think it was exactly 10 days later on the 15th of January of this year. That same Citadel was destroyed by Wangs because of the disagreement between Wangs and Ader. But I think it really kind of illustrates the complete unnecessary parting of ways between the two groups. We're not blue with Wangs. Nobody really is blue with Wangs. That's kind of their thing. They don't want blues, but they still can be very valuable and potent allies. And I scoured Ader's kill board, and not just Ader because that would be an incomplete search, but I also searched the 2 solar system kill boards where they had Athenors. And I was able to find that Ader has some alt corp that's like Ader library something, very roleplay sounding. I think Jules would approve.
Absolutely.
And then they also have that group they're friends with is like was it Malvian Row Industries?
Malrow.
Yeah.
Malrow, now known as Convocation of Empyreans, is the new alliance that Asherothi's running.
Yeah. So those guys, they all kind of mined Ader's moons. They had 10-10, Planet 10, Moon 10 in Aishi, and then they had was it 8-4, I believe, in Aderain. And anyway, between I think it was November, December, January, and February, the end of last year and the beginning of this year, 4-month span between both solar systems, I was able to find a whopping 2 kill mills where Wangs killed Ader/Ader associated miners. 2 ships. 2 separate occasions. One time, the first time they did drop, it was like 8 or 10 blops, very nasty fleet, and destroy the crap out of one coveter. And then something in the neighborhood of, I don't know, I think it was 5 or 10 days later, they came in and killed Young Puke and his coveter with a single Black Ops. But 2 isolated incidents, 2 dead coveters, not really a big deal. And that is what prompted the Ader CEO Bayonex to I know on the interview he mentioned that he was not going to tell his players to go defend Wangs. But what he kind of neglected to mention was that he actually sent out a Discord on their Discord, Discord-wide broadcast that anybody who defends Wangs basically will be like avoxed and expelled and excommunicated. It's a little bit more extreme than just not asking his guys to help. He very openly banned it
and declared anybody outside like GMVA that helped Wangs as public enemy number 1.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is all dramatic, and I think it's fair, though, to talk about a little bit of the backstory of what happened with Wangs and Aderon when Aderon left the militia about 2 years ago, probably now, or a year and a half, there was a falling out with Fed Up, right? So I think a lot of this has to do with their history with Fed Up, right? Fed Up had a very heavy falling out with both Wangs and GMVA a year and a half ago with this whole cluster that happened in Nullsec. And things were sort of stale around then, and the relationships sort of fell apart, and Wangs had a lot to do with evicting Fed Up from both the war zone and Nullsec, and then that's our feel that we were evicted.
Oh yeah, well I wouldn't
there's
say
spice there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
and
I'll
those wounds are fresh still. So you got this group that's coming back because they never wanted to leave. Aderon did not want to leave faction warfare, and when Fed Up left, it created kind of a rift within Fed Up. So when they came back, they were going back to the content that they loved and wanted, but there was this like pain that was there,
Yeah, and I'll jump in and talk a little bit about that, because I had some experience with the post eviction Fed Up diplomatic drama as well, because although I wasn't there really for when everybody got evicted, I was aware when I came back to the game, I got the story from everybody that was involved on our side about what had happened. And, basically Wangs, for various reasons, mostly to do with personal dislike of Fed Up leadership, decided to run that campaign and evict Fed Up from what used to be Gal Millistan, and it was all our happy united Gal Mill home, right? And so that happened, and kind of GMVA was stuck in the middle. We were being pulled on both sides. Wangs offered to let us join, and if I'm not mistaken, we were actually told that if we helped take Fed Up's territory, we could keep whatever we helped take.
Yeah, we were being trying to be bribed, basically, to support the campaign to siege the Fortizar and shit up there in that section of class. And I was I was in a fucking pickle with this, because Silver, you and I had shots at FanFest, right? Tequila shots. And I try not to fuck over people that I've had tequila shots with. And our draw was trying to wage this huge campaign against to sort of consolidate Cloud Ring, and I was trying to figure out a way to navigate this without trying to split the alliance, because a lot of people in my alliance were not trying to shoot Gal Mill people. That would not have been very popular. And Fed Up did have a huge impact in Losec before that time, trying to keep Cal Mill out of Losec systems and keep Cal Mill from interfering in our situations. Templars Calciff was still very powerful then. There's a lot of actual Caldari militia alliances that were a serious threat. And Federation Uprising had always been a supporter of our defensive efforts in this situation. So we were sort of attempting to navigate a neutral route, perhaps making enemies of both groups in certain ways. Some of the Ardraw did not trust us much after that. But we basically ended up trying to avoid direct confrontation with Fed Up. Yeah. But at the same time, it still caused drama, for sure.
Yeah, and I remember one particular incident when GMVA's Sov was being attacked by, it was basically Exodus and Rogue Caldari Union had been paid by some undisclosed third party to troll our Sov really heavily in Cloud Ring, and it was a pretty determined effort for a while. And so we defended our Sov, and then we went on a campaign to take out some of their citadels in Vlilarier and Nina, and Wangs offered to help. So here we were shooting a Rogue Caldari Union citadel in Nina, and Templars shows up to help them, and then who else? Fed Up. Fed Up starts shooting us, right? And we're like, at this point, I think they were actually still in the Gallente militia when that happened.
We were.
And Soder immediately rage war decked them, which is hilarious.
It's just
what's interesting about that whole event was that my guys were not supposed to shoot you. We just had people that felt like they wanted to whore. We were there specifically to shoot Wangs, right? Wangs were the guys that removed us from the gameplay that we liked, so we will come back every time we have the opportunity to shoot Wangs.
Yeah,
You
and
guys were not supposed to be targeted, but
I
things
could have
happen.
understood that, but what really soured us, and I think this is sort of what started a lot of antipathy towards FedUp, more than had existed before, was I personally reached out to Casey, and Casey had been previously, making friendly overtures towards me. We'd been interacting on the Faction Warfare Committee Discord. He'd invited me to come like whaling with them to kill Rorquals and stuff like that. And I reached out to him. I was like, "Hey, man, this is kind of not cool. Like, maybe you don't realize what's going on here, but Wangs is helping us defend our Sov, against these pirates. And so, like this is a pretty serious thing for us." And he basically told, I don't know how censored I need to make my language here, but he basically gave me the finger and said that GMVA had betrayed FedUp and all this stuff, and you know from here ever on, FedUp was going to view GMVA as the enemies. I went on the FedUp Discord to be like, "Hey, this is kind of not cool," and Contra banned me. So it was like, all right.
Yeah,
I guess we're not friends anymore.
Drama is drama B, but you had all,
Yes.
like Casey probably did not have the authority to say such things. He never held any sort of office. He was a recruiter, but he was not like a diplomat or any sort of.
Well, now he's
leader,
like in charge, right?
No, in fact, he doesn't play anymore. So
No, I saw him in
people
Blessed.
think that because like I went to Toronto, right?
Become alliance director. That was a source. That was a source of
recruitment, right? He was director of recruitment. But a funny story: Casey was a very active person. He was in every Discord known to man. He talked to everyone. So he was the face of FedUp. So much so that I went to Eve North in Toronto, and I had the flag and stuff, and somebody literally came up to me and asked me if I was Casey.
That's great.
I'm like, no.
So
no.
that incident is kind of interesting because I had a very similar experience with Ader when this situation happened. Because Young Puke's Coveter gets killed. I've had a lot going on in real life, that had taken me away from the game, but I kind of came back, and I'm the Alliance diplomat, and this huge diplomatic disaster had unfolded in my absence. And so I reached out to Banex and MP and various people to kind of like figure out what was going on, and Young Puke as well. And I was getting basically this exact same thing, that GMVA had betrayed Ader by not joining them to stand up to Wangs and help them in their, tilting at windmills. And it was just like, why would you ever expect that from us? What would ever give you the idea that we would think that was a good thing for us to do?
Yeah, so I just wanted to color the whole story. Like, it does appear that Aderon was like quick to react to an attack or two attacks from Wang's entities. One of them was Soul Takers, right? And Soul Takers they're Wangs, but they're just going to be Soul Takers. The rest, they're a very independent organization forever, a very storied
They've
group.
been there for like years.
Yeah,
right?
they live in Old Man Star for probably the better part of 10 years.
And they will be there until the servers shut down.
Exactly.
So you have to tolerate that at some point, right?
So they're not always going to follow exactly what Wang's goal would be. So like if they saw a couple of juicy targets, they're just going to go right out and attack them regardless of what Wang. If it's not blue, then it's free game for them.
Absolutely.
So what appeared to be an overreaction from Aderon probably stemmed from all of this drama, and which, by the way, it's just game. Jules, I still love you. I want to have shots with you again one day. I know we exchange like explicitives and locals sometimes. And...
a little bit, a tiny. It's all video games. Yeah. It's all video games, right? So
I harbor no personal drama with any of you guys, but we had all this game play going on. So Aderon reacts to this attack from a Wang's group, and then is upset with the rest of Galmil, really, because GMVA, you really are Galmil now, right? You have a bunch of groups, the lion's share of the active Galmil.
Well, and I'll also say one of the points that was made in the previous Talking in Station was like, why would GMVA do this? Why would they fight against the militia? And you can make the argument that like GMBA is Galmel. It's not really true. There are groups like GOG. There are other like independent groups out there. And if you look at where those groups have been in this conflict, it's Ader that has been on its own fighting everybody else in the militia. GOG flies with Wangs. All of these other groups are either neutral completely and like, aren't showing up, or they're on our side. So it really is. It's been Ader kind of isolated.
If I can add to that, yet Renai is right. If you look at like where are the Galmo groups of this conflict, not including Ader, it's on the Wang side. But also look at who's fighting with Ader. It's all of the Cowmill groups, Hobos, which is very very pro Cowmill, and also we went out of our way to help Ader in the past fight Hope. They're fighting with Ader now against Wangs, and you also have IRED, which is currently not in Cowmill, but certainly an extremely pro Cowmill group.
Ishik Rada. It's a Kaldari like named alliance.
I couldn't even say it. It's a ridiculously complicated
name. I mean, to the extent that GMVA is an iconic roleplay Gallente alliance, Ishik Rada is perhaps even more so an iconic Kaldari roleplay alliance that has been in and out of faction warfare.
Right. So why is Ader helping all these Cowmill groups fight Galmill is a better question in my opinion.
Well, I think like they and like FedUp's current in-game status is that we're still burned that we didn't receive more help for being evicted the first time, right? So there's sort of this we don't really recognize you as Galmill. Right, so like they disagree with your position in Galmill is what I think this is.
Yeah, and I think that's probably that's a perspective that is valid to them, I'm sure. But you see people saying like in Reddit threads and directly that like Templars, well, they've been friends to us since we moved out to Nullsec, and so they're better friends than our Galmill allies, and it's like, well, why aren't we allowed to feel that way about Wangs? Right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, like why is Templars a more valid Galmill ally? Templars Kalsif, their name includes Kaldari, by the way. Why are they a more valid ally than Wangs?
Straight up Kaldari militia still.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Right. But the only other remaining point I would make on this topic would be we all have flown with Aderon Robotics and with FedUp for many years. And Aderon Robotics is currently joining our fleets, by the way. Like, they're joining Valor Accord's fleets for system pushes.
So that's interesting.
I think the line members,
how much of the line members here? Yeah, how much are they involved with the drama up here, right? Like, and that's always been a Galmill thing. Like, honestly, we've always been like a dysfunctional family that comes together when we have to. But like way up here, there's always been like we fight with each other like we're married. So is that what's going on here? And the line members are sort of just like cool or not involved really?
I hope so.
And that's my. I would never have any animus against any actual like line members of any kind. The only thing I take issue with is if Paynex is calling me out specifically, or my officers out specifically, as attempting to fight the Gallente militia. That was never my intention with anything, and I would oppose any alliance decisions that would have opposed Gallente militia interests. It's unfortunate that being neutral is interpreted as being the enemy, unfortunately.
Well, we're not exactly neutral with the Wangs deal. Like we are definitely on, have been showing up and flying with them. But
well, a very good point is if it was just Ader and like just Ader attacking Wangs, I don't think we'd show up at all.
True,
but
yeah,
they are in this kind of growing self-destroying coalition against Wangs, and I know for me personally, I was certainly there to help Wangs fight Hobos and help Wangs fight IRED and all these other groups, and Ader happened to show up.
They had like four people. Four people show up. Yeah.
I love all these little situations because FedUp showed up to some Citadel fight after the one you talked about earlier, where we were there with Templars. I was in the fleet with Spartan, right? He was the FC, but there were so many like integral little ticks. Like we were there to shoot Wangs, not exactly you, but Marrow was on your side, who were blue to us. Like, so like in my video,
Well,
you can
that's
see
just
us.
E for you.
Yeah, target
Yeah.
blues. And I remember somebody calling me out in our legacy coalition, like, "Oh, dude, we don't shoot blues." I'm like, "Oh, I contacted Malro prior to that fight, and I was like, I realized you're going to be on the other side. I'm sorry if Spartan calls you primary." So it's like these webs that we spin, and like you guys feel like you've always been put in the middle between whatever the hell is going on with Wangs and Fed Up / Aderon, right?
Well, yeah, like to provide you some more additional flavor to this, I was at E Vegas like in 2017 or something, and Papa Bearfish, who was like an R-Draw officer back then, was like, it took me to the side of this meeting, and he was like at this event, this E Vegas event, he's like, "We need to talk about Roy Henry. We need to talk about Black Fox." And he was like
trying to get started with the conflict of Ardra and Black Fox for years. They hated each other.
Yeah.
It was a whole civil war between the two of them, and then they wind up together in the same alliance.
And then they hang out together. No, but he was like,
GMVA was part of that war against Ardra.
Right. We were trying to defend Black Fox.
And GMVA and Black Fox were on one side of an actual war civil war, right?
Yeah, I talked to Ashtarothi about this, and he was remarking on the irony because he was CEO of Ader at the time, and Ader stayed out of that war.
They did. And, you're right.
Yeah.
It's like ancient history, and this is like the chronicles of this bizarre internecine, like low-sec, angry uncle, angry cousin kind of mud wrestling that happens in LoSec. And that's really why LoSec is so much fun to so many people, because they do see that kind of actual dynamic, interactive diplomacy. Whereas in nullsec, it's like after 1,000 years, the Northern Coalition will eventually fight these other people if, these things happen. And that causes a lot of like boredom, right? That kind of sort of monolithic, glacial diplomatic interaction is very boring to people. In LoSec, you get these kind of like, people hate each other, then they love each other, then they hate each other again. And there's like, oh, but this person shit talked this dude while he was drunk in local chat. And then this dude, like,
shout out to Lucian Lacard.
The fucking.
Oh god, I can't even fly through LoSec without that guy being like, holy shit, the hate for me and that guy is intense.
There's a lot. And
shit talker number one.
he like tried to have a coup d'etat in Moira Corp while he was in Moira. Then he tried to like turn off the TS3 server while I was in Amsterdam for Easterdam. And I was like on my laptop in my hostel trying to like manage the situation. But there's a lot of that in LoSec, and that's actually fun too. Is like you actually have something interesting happen. At least it's like a sitcom. It's like something new every episode.
Oh, it's definitely a sitcom.
So
where do we go from here, boys? Like the rumor on the street was that there was an impending war deck against Ader from GMVA. Is that a thing? Not a thing?
No.
There's no way. There's no way. Also, like they're in my fucking fleet like every other week. So
yeah, that I didn't know. So that's interesting.
We were wondering at what point Ader was going to war deck us, but I guess Young Puke left and became a hobo, so that's probably unlikely.
Yeah, that's a recent development. He was one of their main CEOs.
FCs,
FC, yeah. So that's good.
He took a couple of guys with him, plus looked like a kind of a little army of his own alts over to hobos, which was and still is a pro cowmill group and enemy of.
To weave more story, he became CEO of JREX, which is one of the founding corps of FedUp.
Oh, I don't think he's CEO. Last I checked, he's director.
The CEO is probably CEO, but his job is to resurrect the corp of JREX.
Right.
Who is a corporation in hobos originally, or past corporation of FedUp. So the wheel spins.
Like in the 20th of February, I got an email from a group called Pew Pew Gangsters, and they said they're a small Galmil faction warfare corp. We just started today. Most of our members met in Aderon and left to pursue PvP faction warfare. So like, there's been a lot of internal disruption inside of Aderon Robotics, and I have to sympathize. Like, I was trying to find a way to like sort of coach Aderon if I can. I don't want to be like a patronizing, asshole. I try to help people when I can, and it doesn't always work, I know. But like, you try to encourage people to be successful. And corporations in EVE Online are very difficult to manage. Like anything in EVE Online is hard to do, much less trying to fucking manage a corporation. So it's understandable that they found themselves in this diplomatic quandary. I would have hoped that there would have been a diplomatic solution that could have resolved it more amicably for everybody involved. And it's unfortunate that their fleet commander and other corporation members are now leaving to create new corporations as a result of this drama. Of course, I would never, and that's why I was concerned when you said that there was rumors of us war decking Aderon's. Like, I would never do that. There's no way in hell. Like, I would fucking disband the alliance before I fucking war deck Aderon Robotics. So whatever,
I mean, unless they started actively AWOXing us in places, that's the kind of thing that we would war deck anybody before. But one thing I will say that I've heard from several Ader people that I've talked to privately and sort of seen in channels, there's this comment of, well, GMVA has always looked down on Ader, and you see it even from people that have been around for a long time. And there's definitely, going all the way back to even before FedUp, when it was Marcel Devereaux, who's a person that I've met at FanFest and and had a good time with. Ader has always kind of set itself apart from the greater Galmill, community. There was one point where literally every Gallente, when we were doing that Warzone push where we all got our medal, that I mentioned earlier, back in like 2012 or 2013, every Galmill group was on the same United TeamSpeak server except for Aderon Robotics. And that was kind of a goofy thing because Marcel Devereaux liked Mumble. And he insisted that it was superior, and he wanted to use
let's not even get started with the comms wars, right? Mumble's better. No, TeamSpeak's better. No, I use freaking Skype.
Ventrilo.
The number of jokes that have been made about Aderon Robotics and Mumble by GMVA members and similar stuff to that, like, absolutely. There has been,
but it's not just Ader. I see this everywhere. Everyone I try to ever work with is like, oh, we got to use our comms. No, we got to use our comms. Our comms are better because of this, and that. I'm like, wow, so much disruption happens over whose comms are better all the time.
You got to join their IRC, right? You can't
we use IRC chat. We still use AOL chat. Like it's ridiculous.
The thing I heard was we don't use IRC, but you have to join it anyway.
Yeah, I remember back in those days, it was very complicated to even get into Aderon Mumble, right? Like, you had to go through their website, and there was like this wonky off process, and like
you had to take a sample of your blood and mail it to Marcel Devereaux for DNA testing.
It's been streamlined, but that's still a thing. But yeah, I mean, there definitely has been like, I always felt it was pretty much good natured, but I could understand how people could like be salty about some of the, the back and forth or whatever. In reality, I think most people in GMVA have a positive impression of Ader, but for this other stuff that's been going on. At least their line members.
Absolutely.
Like there's been Aderon Robotics people joining fleets for the Ennelary push. The Ennelary push is the most recent Swiss System Siege that we're starting to kick off here. Operational security. Oh no, there's only 6 Caldari systems left, by the way.
Yeah, so talk to me about what does LowSec look like in 2020. So we got this political environment. What does faction warfare look like? What's the state of Caldari? Seems like they're falling off again.
We're grinding them into tiny particles of dust. But like we're not trying to like kill their PvP base. What we're trying to do is flip the systems for like a political statement against CCP's lack of attention to the situation primarily. I think CCP needs to understand that if they want to have a dynamic sort of source of PvP in their video game, faction warfare is one of those key engines that feeds faction warfare. It feeds the LowSec in general. It also feeds nullsec. A lot of the faction warfare players go to nullsec and they become fleet commanders. So if faction warfare is not, if you don't do stuff in LowSec to help that community out, you're gonna dehydrate nullsec of any actual leadership. Because people that are motivated in the video game come from faction warfare typically.
No, I couldn't agree more. I argue that all the time.
Yeah, FedUp, like you guys succeeded immensely after you left faction warfare and you went to your region. You're reaping the benefits. You got dudes that know what's going on. You're doing great. So it's totally the situation that you got to sort of pay some attention to what the fertile grounds of faction warfare. And if we flip these systems, I think that sort of pushes CCP to understand that, well, perhaps something needs to be done to make it more interesting for multiple parties to be involved than just a Gallente militia party.
So you're going for 100% control again?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Why not? And
I want my goddamn medal.
Yeah, well, nobody's going to get a medal.
I don't think so.
I will not stop crying about it.
Yeah, but the CCP
when I become president
many times. Well, maybe.
Elect me president. Elect me president. I'll give you a medal.
There you go.
I think that's actually a really good point because, I mean, forever, as long as my character exists in EVE, as long as the servers are on, I have that little medal on my character sheet, right? And it's a ridiculous tiny thing, but it showed that CCP kind of recognized a player accomplishment, right? And that's one of the things
that's extremely motivating to a lot of players.
Yeah, and it's sad that, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a medal, but there's not enough of that in faction warfare now.
Or in EVE in general.
Yeah, in EVE. I have a theory about the medal thing. I honestly think that CCP, the fact that they will not award medals for Warzone control again, is because they recognize that can be gamed, right? That the Warzone can be flipped back and forth with cooperation between farmers. So I think rewarding that might be misguided, possibly.
Nah, I think the one guy who wrote the code for the medal left.
That's more likely.
It's the case of some of these things, sure.
A more depressing way to think of it, yeah.
So one thing that I was going to say about faction warfare and the role that it plays, that and I've been involved in it for nearly, off and on for nearly 10 years now, is I can't even count the number of people. You talked about Fed Up as an organization, how they kind of built themselves up in faction warfare, moved on. There's so many groups that have done that, and that's, I think, so important to the EVE ecology. But just the individuals that have come through Moira and GMBA that I see later, and they're like block level FCs, in big nullsec groups. It's countless. Like just the number of individual players that develop their skills and their abilities before moving on to other parts of the game. Because faction warfare is so accessible, it's countless, and I think that that's a metric that CCP doesn't see because it's not something that's easily tracked, like
it's multiplicative
numbers.
It's multiplicative.
I think they recognize that. Like, to me, and we won't get too deep. We're running a little late here, but to me, the economy, the ecosystem of EVE of the middle class is sort of shutting down a little bit, and it's not the fault of faction warfare exactly, but people used to cut their teeth in low sec. You had to get into Horde or Swig, or these guys used to be feeder corps. If you wanted to fly for PL, you had to go into a feeder corp. You had to develop a kill board, man. You had to cut your teeth.
Do stuff. You got to do stuff.
But that does not exist anymore. The need for that is gone because now you could just join Horde, or you can just join Karma Fleet, or you can just join Brave, and you're right there at the perceived end game already. So if you want to fly if you want to fly with Pandemic Legion, you can today just join Pandemic Horde and you can join PL fleets, where that never used to be the case. So that kind of shut this convection down, where people used to feed through low sec because they wanted to get to PL because they were the big bad dogs, but now you don't have to do that anymore.
Absolutely true, and that's. But what causes the deficiency of that is that you don't actually get players that know how to PvP when they join this groups.
Oh yeah, I had this conversation on TIS public Discord a while ago. What we see is 10-year-old newbies, people who don't understand mechanic the way that you think they would after a decade of playing the game. They wouldn't be able to fly an interceptor to save their life, but they could sure as hell get into a Munin and press F1 where they're anchored on their FC, because
they get fleet warped and then they shoot the gun.
Right.
Do.
Exactly. They don't do what you guys do, like flying all over this, doing your solo small gang / siege operation. It's very much more individual based, and your numbers are smaller anyway. And a group of fleet of 100, one guy not doing the right thing, inconsequential. And a group of 10 trying to siege a system, one guy not doing the right thing is a huge impact. Right.
Absolutely. And that is what it makes it interesting to players too. If they feel that they have a reason to try hard, if they feel that they have a reason to actually perform, they're going to try to perform. They're going to try to improve. If they're in a fleet of 100, they don't feel that pressure. They don't feel that the crucial sort of community need for that performance, and they're not going to try. And then if people don't develop as people, they're not going to. There's no feedback loop. Like people, there's like a human psychology kind of need, right? The human psychology wants to learn, wants to grow, wants to improve, and that's what EVE Online as a system is really geared towards. It rewards people improving in skills and character and ability to play the game. But if you don't do that in small groups, and if you're just in a big blob, you're just not going to be forced to do that. And you're going to get, it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to quit the game, or I'm just not going to play the game because there's no excitement, there's no development, there's no growth to my abilities. And that's part of the problem that the big blobs have, is that their players join, they just they don't learn, and then they don't get that feedback that the human psychology thrives on. And that's why faction warfare is necessary, and in my opinion, and small groups like ours and yours and everybody else's that are smaller groups are really useful, because those communities, you grow and thrive, you get better at the game, and you're rewarded for it psychologically, but also from like you're able to actually do something with your spaceships instead of just being one of the 100 people or so.
Yeah. This has been a fantastic discussion with you guys. Is there any other hot topic you guys wanted to talk about before I cut to a few news pieces we have? I wanted to get your input on those too, if you'd like. But anything else?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Low sec, faction warfare, drama with Ader. Any final points you wanted to make from any of you?
I think it's possible that there might be some diplomatic overtures towards Ader coming in the near future. I've been kind of away from the game and for real life stuff, and now I'm back, and I'll probably do my job as a diplomat and reach out here at some point.
But I think there's a little bit of a lull amidst the heaviest of the drama, between coordinated fleets between our two groups. But I think we're really seeing that a lot now with we're kind of pushing into Lurie pretty hard. And we've seen a lot of Ader in our fleets and flying together, doing different objectives. So it's encouraging to see that kind of cooperation again. As far as the Warzone goes, I would say that we definitely have kind of weeded out most of the weaker will Calmel groups. The Russian groups in particular all folded whenever Smile and Wave came from the Minotaur Warzone and wiped out Kanaka. They kind of folded like a cheap suit. And then who else do we have? We had a couple of groups, Calmo groups, that also left Calmo recently.
RVB.
Well, I don't really even count them. They were never super LP heavy. They were more, I think, about the fights, and I don't think they ever truly understood FAC War, and that's why they left.
Yeah. One note of praise for Calmil, like the strong-willed ones that are left, is Panian Dominion is still there, and so
I admire them. Yeah,
fight.
It's not easy.
Yeah, they got some solidarity there. Of course, they have lost several members, and so those members have actually joined Gallente militia for various reasons. Many people are leaving Caldari militia simply because of Diana Kim and some of the more cancerous personalities in the Caldari militia, unfortunately.
For the state.
Yeah, there's just too much. There's just a little bit too much nonsense. You got to be willing to treat the game as a video game, and you have to be willing to treat your fellow players as people, right? And that sometimes gets lost in the internet anonymity. You forget that people are just human beings. We all put our pants on one leg at a time. But the Caldari militia may have lost sight of that a little bit, unfortunately, which might have been why, like, Mantle Global Industries left Caldari militia and joined Gallente militia. That was madness.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And Horacek.
And Horacek, who was a Panian dude, he joined Moira Corporations. Like, okay, that's weird.
They're both awesome members, too.
They're awesome, great. Yeah, they're doing a lot of work. They're shooting lots of cars.
They are.
They're doing great work. But it's like, I wonder why they left. And the reason why is that you have to build a community. And unfortunately, I don't think the Caldari militia did a good enough job of building a community that was accepting and tolerant and attempting to keep their players happy. So that's my unfortunate take on the situation. So,
well, yeah, I think the low sec definitely has a lot of things going on. The rhetoric for too long was that LowSec is dead. I don't necessarily think it's dead. I think you guys are doing great work to keep it alive and keep CCP's attention on it, and I hope you guys continue.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and a good transition to that is, Jules, you mentioned that sometimes you get lost the fact that the person you're arguing with in comms or in local is an actual person. One way to remedy that is to go to an Eve meet and meet them in person, like you and I did. Like, man, I met a lot of your guys. But unfortunately, I can't end the show without discussing the fact that FanFest 2020 has been canceled, unfortunately, due to coronavirus fears.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Well, it makes complete sense, though.
Yeah, it's prudent, and I don't hold it against them at all. I think it was the right thing to do, especially early, where people still have a chance to, change plans, recoup costs, or whatever have you.
Right. It's clear that the growth curve is just, and it's just unfortunate that it's this much of a problem. It's the first time that any FanFest has ever been canceled because of infectious disease. So that might be worth discussing in and of itself. And I think the first FanFest was 17 years ago, or like 16 years ago, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a very unique and very troubling development that this is even happening, and we have to support our community as this happens. And of course, everybody should take every precaution necessary if you're traveling overseas. Pay attention to news and the health officials' warnings regarding this type of situation.
Well, I think probably one part of it is, South Korea is being hit pretty hard by this, and with Pearl Abyss headquartered there, and the connection there between CCP, you can imagine that that's got to have an impact.
Absolutely true.
Well, Jules, you've been to a lot of FanFests, and one of the topics of conversation, the top 5 things people talk about after FanFest is how sick everyone gets. Right? I mean, it's right in the weird season where people wind up coming home.
Flu.
Yeah, the FanFest flu, right?
It's called it's actually the more colorful term is the Icelandic death flu was the appropriate phrase.
Yeah. So if that was happening with normal illnesses, obviously we can't take any chances with something more serious.
They just had their first reported infection in Iceland actually today. And,
like this notice came out like just a few hours after that was announced.
Right, and you have to, if you've been to Iceland before, if anybody here and in the audience has been to Iceland before, you see that it's a very small country. It's not going to have a lot of resources. Those people there are not prepared for a large outbreak of this kind. So it's only logical, unfortunately. And it is going to have a huge impact to the community of EVE Online, because a lot of people did invest heavily into preparing for FanFest, and I was thinking of going. I just been too busy in real life to even consider getting the tickets yet. And then I was like, this virus thing seems like a big deal. I should probably wait to see what's going to happen. And unfortunately, it is going to continue being an issue for everyone. And all the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco is canceled. A lot of other events are being canceled or postponed. So it's wise that CCP is taking precautions to protect their community and their own developers from what's possibly a very catastrophic disease that's currently spreading.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what will happen to other EVE meets that are planned. Like, EVE North is not too far away on the calendar.
San Diego. And Vegas. Yeah, it's a big problem. We all have to hope that for the entire country and the entire planet, that this is going to come under control at some stage. Some very, very busy medical work is taking place, I'm sure, to find solutions to this problem.
Yeah, so that's unfortunate. Other incidences in the news is a Reddit thread out, and this might be a little bit out of your wheelhouse, Jules, but trouble for Sort Dragon and his coalition of Deadco. With this Reddit post recently saying that there was terms from goons that were unfavorable, and that potentially corporations or entities within Darkness and Deadco will be going elsewhere. They named Legacy as a potential. I find this a little bit sad. I don't know how you guys feel. Like, you love him or hate him, Sort is like a personality.
He's been a huge power, right? I know him just well enough from like being on the periphery of his of his empire. He's always been a huge force, and it's unfortunate that it seems to be sort of shutting down a bit. I guess it's rough. Reddit is sort of a cesspool, in my opinion. So
we don't know if this is all true, but there are enough sources out there that I see that this could be potentially, at least mostly true.
Right, it's quite possible for sure. It's unfortunate. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't have any.
We'll see.
Yeah, much comment on.
But sort of the offshoot of this is like there might be another situation brewing in the South, because last night there was a pretty large fight between the Legacy Coalition minus Test, so all the groups that make up Legacy, Fed Up, Brave, IOU, Rec, up against Wrecking Crew. Speaking of Templates Calcif and Purple Headed Warriors and a couple other groups in there. Dropped the Fortizar right on the border of Catch and Pravi, in dangerous range of Legacy space. And Wrecking Crew has been in Pravi for a couple months now. They've taken some solid from them, sort of the northwest corner of Pravi, if you're looking at the Eve map. And they've been sort of conflicting for a while. And then one of Test's main FCs leaves, set out, and joins Wrecking Crew. And I guess it's only a matter of time before he would set himself up to sort of farm his alma mater, I guess you would call it. But what was more troubling is there was a lot of groups in that fight for the Wrecking Crew side that we sort of didn't expect. And I'm talking about everyone that exists except Goons. So NC was there, PL was there, Horde was there, many other groups. Siege Green was there. If you can name someone relevant, they were probably there on the side of Setal. And Legacy kind of got overrun. The Citadel went up, and we lost a bunch of dreads and the subcap fight. But this is curious to me as maybe a prelude to further activity. And earlier today on Matterall's show, he had Killer B, which hinted at some sort of deployment. Like
a war.
So he specifically said it wouldn't be Pravi, but the groups on that side had me thinking a little bit about what could be going on in the South. So we'll keep eyes on that. And I guess the last thing I wanted to mention was market changes coming. What do you guys think of this? Holy crap! No more one ISK wars and taxes on broker fees, which is a little bit crazy for a group like mine because broker fees are a decent source of passive income for a corporation that owns a Citadel. What does this mean for offshoring? What does it mean for a new ISK sync being put into the game? Kind of crazy.
Yeah, I, as someone who is not at all a market warrior, I thought this was an interesting way to kind of empower the more casual EVE players. The graph that they had about the minority of buy orders that are being changed 8+ times. Right? I thought that was pretty interesting, and I can imagine this being a positive thing because whenever I put up orders, I always feel some bot is going to be +1ing me no matter what I do, and so hopefully that'll be a good thing for all.
There is that salty sort of, maybe I should dial back my personal opinion.
No, let it out, Jules. That's who you are, bro.
I'm backing out of that comment real quick. But there is a frustration, a valid frustration that many people have made this as sort of their money-making income, right? They have made this sort of their approach to sort of game the market and manipulate the market. And to have a real life allegory, it is sort of like doing limit orders on the stock market, right? You're able to do these cool little market tricks where you're able to buy something that's undervalued and then sell it when it's overvalued. And people crave that kind of stuff, the day trading kind of hit, it's sort of like an endorphin hit for people when they make money that way. So I understand. It's like a PvP kind of thing. And it is the jitters for PvP, but it's but I got 10 ISK on this deal that is for 1,000 tritanium or whatever. And they're very excited about it. And that's fine. I shouldn't judge people as much as I do for it.
Well, and I think in a way, the fact that they're getting rid of the margin trading may enhance that gameplay or make it more accessible for a lot of people. One of my good real life friends recently joined EVE and was getting into the market stuff. And one of the first things that happened was he got taken in by a margin scam or like because you put it up with very, very minor collateral, right? And then the buy order doesn't actually like go through, right? And you've sold this same item somewhere else is a very basic explanation for that for people that aren't familiar. But if that kind of thing can't happen anymore because you have to put up full collateral, I think it actually makes the market game more accessible for people.
We'll have to see. It is a contentious issue. For instance, to show any kind of sentiment, it is quite controversial.
I personally have some serious reservations about how they're doing it. I think they have some good goals. I think that taking away margin trading is probably a positive thing. However, I do think that a wiser approach, rather than make it so you can only change 4 digits of the number, that's kind of interesting. I don't think it's a good thing personally. But instead of that, I think it would have been better to have a increasing tax based on the most recent change to that order. I think that would cripple bots pretty hard while still allowing players to kind of work the market. But we'll see.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. Hopefully, CCP will continue their approach on things of lately of just being iterative, like try one thing and then tweak, right?
Right.
So we'll see.
Fingers crossed.
If only they would bring it to faction warfare.
Hey, there's hope, because I think that tether change was certainly a test of code that can be iterated on. So I'm still hoping
was a thing that
they circle back on and say, okay, that wasn't that damaging. Let's try it in docking. We'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, tiny changes. One step at a time.
Next, they can bring back gate sliding. That would be
please, dear God.
Yeah.
The Lokis are a problem.
Just about everyone that I've had on the show this series about LowSec has mentioned gate sliding as a problem too. So we'll see how that goes.
There are rumors that might be resolved. I can't say more.
That would be good. Anyway, guys, I want to wrap up the show here, but I didn't prep you guys for this, but it was in the notes. One thing we like to do here on the midweek show is go down the list of panel and come up with something that you might be able to tell people that they may not know about EVE Online, whether it be lore, mechanic thing, something about a character or a ship, whatever it may be. I thought this would be a good group to get a perspective on. So I'm going to hit you with it somewhat cold and start with you, Jules. Is there anything you have for viewers or players or anybody watching that they may not know about EVE Online?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do want to. I can tell a quick story then. Basically, back when faction warfare began, you could be able to break faction warfare by camping G to undock, by having 10 Atrons micro drive around in circles. CCP fixed this, so don't go try it at home. But that's how we broke faction warfare, was that we used 10 Atrons. The NPCs could spawn to chase those Atrons and try to kill them, but the Atrons are always too fast to catch up with. And then you just camp the undock with battleships, and it was great fun. It's no longer possible. So
you're dating yourself again, Jules. But yeah,
a little bit. It was like a 2009 kind of story. But it was a weird thing, and CCP has done a good job trying to cancel out a lot of this broken shit. But there's still more work to do. So, in case anybody didn't know that was a fun story.
I think it would be better if they just got rid of NPC police in movie, but that's a whole other conversation.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, F the police, right? Anyway, Gory, is there something you have that people may not know about on EVE Online?
I don't know. I know some tidbits about stuff before I play, but I feel like that's not really fair. I guess a fact about me, which I probably shouldn't share, is the very first militia I ever joined was Cowmill, which is pretty funny.
Traitor!
And the second, that's the meme. I am GMVA spy. But and then the second militia I joined was a Mar Mill. So yeah, and then here I am in Gallente, and I love it.
We're glad to have you.
Hashtag not a spy.
Yeah, for the true Gallente patriots out there, you might not know there is now a Gallente role playing Discord server. I'm going to put the link in chat real quick. So if you're interested in that whole Gallente role playing angle, there are a bunch of very passionate nerds on this Discord.
That's a good description.
Fantastic. And I guess I'll round it out with I hear all the time that joining the Gallente militia with your main specifically is a problem. And I hate when I hear this, right? Because people are like, how do you go to JITA? You don't go to JITA. What you do is you join a corp that has logistics wings that have figured this out over the last 10 years, right? So you could absolutely...
Or a single ult, right? You just need one dude that's not militia corp.
Just sit in JITA and buy your stuff for you and have somebody ship it to you. Like it is not a big deal. It's not a game-breaking experience for you to put your main character into any militia, including Gallente. You'll do just fine if you want to get that.
So that's a really good fact. I would like to add to that and say, like, if you are super limited and you can only do one character at a time and you don't have friends necessarily or you don't want to rely on friends to move your stuff, you can actually just start an alpha account for free and on day one get them in a hauler that can hold up to 30,000 cubic meters.
Yeah, there are ways around it. The corporations that you join will definitely teach you how to live just fine without having to ever step foot in high sec, really, with your main character.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that about putting your main in faction warfare. One thing people might not know, and I guess I'll double dip here, when I went to FanFest in 2014, one of the proposals that was being talked about for faction warfare was like a faction warfare hall pass that you could it would be like an item that would temporarily associate you with the militia that you could use without leaving your corporation. So you could be in Goon Swarm or Pandemic Legion or whatever and decide, I want to spend a week in the militia and activate it. And that idea got abandoned. I think it maybe was too farmable or what. We never really heard anything. But something interesting that I think that they should reconsider.
Excellent. That would be it's an interesting idea. But I think that's going to do it for us tonight, everyone on Talking Stations. Thank you to our guests. A couple announcements. Check out Talking Stations Discord. There is very frequently CCPers in the public voice chat and in the channel there. You can ask questions, and it's a good source of info. Thank you to our patrons, and check out our website where you can find this on podcast and our YouTube channel. But that would be it for us here tonight, and I will see you next week on Talking in Stations midweek update.
First, Julian Sitter for president, and that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.